Today, Audubon Explorer is walking along a trail here in Deltona with Chris Collier. Now, Chris is the environmental specialist for the City of Deltona. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, we're walking in a green area here in the city. Now, green areas are special to Deltona and all cities. Large metropolitan cities have fairly well-groomed parks, but they're not these wild, undeveloped areas, and we still have a few of those here in Deltona. As you can see behind me here, we're not that far from an urban setting. There's a neighborhood right behind us, yet we have well over 100 acres in here that is pretty well wild green area with trails in it. Chris, we're here in this green area. Green areas obviously are important to the wildlife around us here, but why? Why are green areas important to wildlife?
Green areas provide habitat for all the different species so that they can forage. Some require sandy areas, some require, more cover, nesting areas, room for berries, fruits, and other things for them to feed on. And it provides protection from the human species versus being, around other people who are going to try and kill them. They'll come back into here, but there are other species that will predator on them within their own communities.
So this is not a protected area for them. In other words, once they get here, they're not safe. They're just not having to deal with humans.
Correct, for the most part, yes. Humans do interact through trails and such with these species, but for the most part, these species will go away from the humans. But if you do encounter these species on these trails, just stop, stay away, let the species in their habitat go the other direction for your own safety and theirs.
Okay. You mentioned about they would go out into the neighborhoods. Now, I've always learned that, species very much like edges between the wild area and the totally civilized area, pastures, fences, everything like that. They like those areas, but I never understood exactly why they would like those edges.
It depends on which type of species it is. Some of them like the grass, the bahias, the St. Augustines, the such. Some of them like it for the coolness or for the open sun, for the different reptiles and such that need sun. Some will venture for food. Some birds will use those yards that are fertilized for eating grubs, worms, and other bug insects. They're good aerators for the yards. And they'll just travel to find cool spaces, warm spaces, dry spaces, that type of thing. And
using the edges gives them that feeding area plus the protection, quick escape route.
Correct.
Back into the wild area.
Correct.
Okay. Let's walk up the trail a ways here and we'll talk and look a little bit more for some species ourselves and learn a little bit more about what's here in the woods with us.
Sounds good.
Well, Chris, we've been walking a ways, not that long, but you can see from what we walked up the long road there, we've been seeing a lot of different animals, everything from very, very small insects, lizards, birds. What are some of the animals that people can expect to see when they're out walking the trails? And you mentioned it very briefly before, but how should they actually interact with these animals?
Well, depending on what type of animal. The birds obviously will be above your head and flying around, and they're just kind of curious about you. You've got your lizards and your snakes. The snakes are the main ones to just kind of watch them, observe them, stop if they're in their movement, and let them move along their space so that less human interaction is best. There's only 6 venomous species of snakes in Florida. So the majority of the snakes that are in this area are non-venomous, but...
Okay, name the venomous for us.
The venomous, all of them, are the cranebrake rattlesnake, the eastern diamondback, the pygmy rattlesnake, copperheads, coral snakes, and cottonmouths.
Do not cuddle up to those.
Yes,
okay.
You do not touch those.
All right, so most snakes, though, are harmless. I mean, if you grab a snake, and even if it's non-poisonous, it will bite you. It's trying to protect itself.
Correct.
So easiest thing is watch them, but let them go.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And they're very important to the habitat. They eat the rats, the mice, the insects, some of the other critters that will invade the residential spaces that are so close to these wooded areas and then wreak havoc there. So every animal has its process.
Very good. All right, so some of the snakes we talked about, some of the birds. What about the four-legged animals with fur?
With fur in here, you will have raccoons, you'll have possums, you'll have potentially bobcats, you can have coyotes, bears, and there's
gray fox. I've seen gray fox in there.
Yeah, fox. And then you have your flying squirrels that are protected that may be in here. You have your brown squirrels, and just other larger birds that would be utilizing the space.
And we have here what, roughly 120 acres of green area that we're walking in right now?
Correct.
Okay. So this green area is important to the species who live in it and around the edges of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a moment ago the flying squirrel was a protected species. I did not know that. I know of flying squirrels. I did not know they were protected. But what are the other protected or more rare species that we might find?
In here specifically, we know we have at least 3 families of scrub jays. Scrub jays are indigenous to Florida only. They are a bluish gray from the top and their backs all the way down to their tail, and they're a solid gray on their belly. They live in families which can consist of anywhere from 2 or more birds per family, and they have territories. So if there's more than one family, they'll have their own territory, and they have an anarchy that has the protective birds that fly around down to where the males feed the females while they're nesting and laying the eggs, and then the rest of them protect the territory so that no other birds will come into, including other scrub jays. Okay,
so we would have scrub jays and the traditional blue jay, both in the same areas.
Blue jays are typically mistaken for scrub jays, but blue jays are white, blue, and black, whereas the scrub jays are the bluish gray with the gray breasts.
Almost a silvery looking, more blue. Okay, interesting. That's scrub jays, flying squirrels.
We have gopher tortoises located within the site. Some have been here for many, many years. They have lay their eggs in the open space by their burrow and lay a clutch of anywhere from 6 to 8 or more eggs, depending on how many survive from predation. Raccoons and possums and all them love to eat those eggs. Then you'll have smaller ones that will now repopulate the area. They're also protected and require permitting and excavation and relocation for construction.
Okay. I've often wondered about gopher tortoises. The areas that they live in look almost desert-like. Okay, what do they feed on? I mean, in these areas, it looks so dry.
Some of the areas can be very sandy and open. Some of them they can live inside habitat such as what's behind us. They just have room to come out and get into the sandy areas, into the grasses. There's actually a plant called gopher apple that they eat that's in some places, and that's where the gopher tortoises start to loom and move out towards the residential neighborhoods because they love bahia grass. Okay. So they'll feed on the grass, and then they'll come back and hang out, or they'll make homes inside the residence yard. So there's no concerns when a gopher tortoise makes a home with you.
Great herds of grazing gopher tortoises.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Gopher tortoises, scrub jays, flying squirrels. Is that pretty much it as far as the protected species?
No, I mean, we'll have some of the owls, depending on which ones. You could have some of the other protected birds, such as osprey, eagles, white snow-tailed birds. What are some of the other ones? The crestals, and then of course you have your bears, and then bobcats.
Okay, bobcats are a protected species?
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yep. So you'll have.
But the coyote is not, and the coyote is not a.
Coyotes can, if they become a nuisance, you can call and FWC and.
Coyote is not considered a native species to our area, is it?
It was not listed as such, but it has kind of, where the population has come up, they have kind of listed them as being more of a native population. But coyotes are usually very typically skittish. So they'll run from you before if you make noise and that type of thing. They're more out to get the smaller animals and that type of thing. But they typically do not want to encounter humans. Smaller
animals will include those small dogs, cats. Okay, that too. So you have to watch your pets. Okay, again, I don't live that far from here, and yes, I've seen coyotes in my neighbor's yard, that type of thing, go loping through. So
Correct.
Yeah, you do have to watch your pets and know, you know.
And this site does have coyotes.
Yeah.
I've come across 2 coyote dens.
Interesting. Chris, let's drill down a little bit tighter if we could, especially on animals people will run into. We aren't that far from the edge of the green area that we were in. There are houses close by. It's 9 o'clock, someone's sitting watching the news on TV, and they suddenly hear the trash can go tipping over in the backyard. And they turn on the lights, and they run out the back door with the flashlight, and they shine it on the trash can, and there sits a raccoon. Cute, little ringtail, little banded eyes, you know, like that. And, you know, hey, that's neat. Okay, let's go pet the little wild animal. Give me the fallacy, okay, of that idea.
I would not recommend getting anywhere near close to the raccoon because they too will protect themselves, and they're hungry, they're feeding, and they don't want to have human interaction, but if they feel threatened like any animal, they will attack, and they do have sharp teeth. If you are in an area where you have good space between you, get something and make a lot of noise, and they'll typically go away. If not, let them finish eating and then go out and pick up the trash and put it back in there, and then
Seal it
strap
up.
the lids or put something on there. But that doesn't stop them necessarily either. But try not to have any interaction with them because they really don't want to have that interaction as well.
Okay. I would think it would be pretty much the same for bears. The area we're in right here, you mentioned bears. There are several bears in this area.
I know of at least 4, and we've had another mating season since then, so we may have more.
Some young cubs out,
Yes.
okay, which means that the sow, the female, could be potentially dangerous because she will be protected of the cubs, okay? In dealing with animals like this, if they're in the trash bins, if you see them on the street, again, going back to, best thing to do is see them, watch them, don't advance toward them, I guess. That would not be a good thing. Should you turn and run away from them?
FWC does not recommend running away from the bears because they may feel threatened and decide to chase you, especially if she has her cubs. The best thing to do is, again, especially with the bears, because their size is far greater and stronger than ours, is to let them finish doing what they're doing. They're hungry. Some of this area does not have enough foraging room, and unfortunately the mother bear here has taught her cubs how to survive on the surrounding residents. So they're used to going to the trash cans. The best thing, again, to alleviate that is to get bear-proof trash cans. Try to seal them off somehow. Don't put your trash out before, you know, the night of or somewhere in that time frame, so that the bears don't have as much access to the trash, and that they start searching for their own food in their own habitat.
Right. By 5:30, normally the bears are already back into their wild spaces and such as that, and they're not going through garbage cans.
No, that's not correct. A lot of time the bears will be out at night. They can be fairly nocturnal when it comes to that because they've learned that there's less human interaction.
Right, but I'm talking about daylight. As daylight starts,
Oh, as daylight,
they will go back.
correct. Yes,
So
daylight starts.
take your
they're not
trash
as
can
often.
out as daylight breaks.
Correct.
All right, less chance of the bears or the raccoons or anything else getting into the trash can. The neighbors might, but not them.
Correct.
Okay. As we raised up children in Deltona, we quite often saw gopher tortoises go slowly lumbering across the roads. There weren't a lot of cars at that time, okay, so they were fairly safe. But not knowing better, my children would go over and pick it up, okay? Now, the fallacy of that is, what does the Florida Wildlife Commission say about picking up a gopher tortoise?
When it comes to gopher tortoises, humans should not have any interaction with them. It is considered harassment or endangerment of the gopher tortoise. Even by putting anything in their above their burrow, trying to cover the burrow from picking up the tortoise, you can put them into a shock because they're not used to having that human interaction. Now, if they're crossing the street, whatever direction they are facing, you can pick them up and put them across the street facing the same direction. And FWC, they don't have an issue with that because you're helping them across the road safely. Yeah. They'll go that direction. Gopher tortoises can go up to 500 miles from their burrows and come back. And they are creature of habit, so they pretty much take the same path. So if they went down the path, turned around just to come back because they wanted to eat the plant down here, every day is the route that they would take.
Okay.
So if they're crossing that road, typically they're going to cross that road on a regular basis. So
that's sort of the little migration area that
correct.
they make a bit large circle for their
Correct.
feeding
So,
circle. Okay.
and when you see a burrow, don't step on the mouth of the burrow or the sandy areas around it, because when it is nesting season and it's the female's burrow, they lay their eggs in the mouth of the burrow on either side.
What is the nesting season, roughly?
It's springtime for the gopher tortoises.
Okay.
So, and then it takes a few weeks for incubation.
So we're thinking, I mean, you know, with warm seasons we have here in Florida, February, March, April, May, keep a distance away from them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And with the mouth of the burrow and the gopher tortoises, and there's actually one sitting on top of its burrow right directly across from us now. That's a good sized gopher tortoise sitting out there getting some sun.
Yes, it is.
With that, you want to make sure that you don't trample across there. You don't try to fill in a burrow. You don't do anything with the burrow, because it is also protected by FWC's regulations. If you want to do any construction with avoidance, you have to silt fence around 25 feet in a radius around the mouth of the burrow to protect the tortoise during development.
Okay.
Or get a permit to relocate, excavate and relocate the gopher tortoise.
Okay. Now, one of the pet peeves I've always had is people who are walking in the woods and they see a deer fawn. Now, traditionally, a deer fawn around people will freeze.
Correct.
All right. The doe will also freeze, okay? And people think, oh, well, that must be an orphan deer fawn. And they pick it up and decide they're going to take it home. Give us the fallacy of that.
You don't want to ever take a fawn away from its mother, or any animal away from its mother, because it will follow. And then once you get the human scent, then potentially the mothers will not take back the animals. I don't interact with deer very often, so I don't have a lot of the information on deers. But again, it's one of those things that they're beautiful for nature. They need to be here. It's not hunting season. You can't touch the babies. Just, again, admire from afar and leave them alone.
All right, so the best advice you can give is enjoy nature at a slight distance. Don't touch, okay?
Correct.
Very good. Chris, when the weather has been warm and suddenly the sun is going down, it's getting cooler, folks want to get out and take a walk in the neighborhood, along the sidewalk, the edge of the street like that, talk to neighbors. One of the more common animals they have some interaction with, normally just seeing them, would be bats flying around. Okay.
Correct.
Tell us, our audience, about bats.
Typically, bats will be around water bodies. They can live in trees, they can live in people's houses, they can live in people's bat houses that they can build, which is wanted because there's a lot of populations of bats out there. They fly out at dusk and they'll go towards the water and they'll eat mosquitoes and bugs all night long, and then they'll fly back in to wherever they're living at come daylight. They're only nocturnal.
How many bugs a night? How many mosquitoes?
Their weight and then some in bugs each night. And there's different size bats, different species of bats, so it also depends on what those are. Okay,
so basically they are nature's mosquito control.
Correct.
Okay, and mosquitoes carry a lot of diseases, also they're just aggravating.
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned when you started off that bats tend to like to be around water bodies, and I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been having rains more often, and the lakes are filling up, as I like to jokingly say, the tide's coming back in, okay? It's not a bare lake bottom anymore. So with the water in the lakes, I've noticed we're seeing more and more what appear to be local flocks, resident flocks of both sandhill cranes and white ibis. Everyone's familiar with the sandhill crane, large bird, about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. The white ibis will be either white colored or sort of a tannish brown and white speckled, but they have that drooping bill. Okay, and they normally go in flocks.
Correct.
Okay. We're seeing them here, and they're here all through the winter now. They don't migrate away. What's happening?
We're having warmer winters, so they're able to stay in the climate longer. And what they're doing is they used to be able to feed off the dried up lake beds, so to speak. they were able to feed there. Now the water's coming back, so they're coming into people's yards, eating, pecking away in the herds, like you were saying, and eating the grubs and the worms and the insects out of people's yards, which is actually a good thing because it helps with, you know, pest control, and it helps with aeration of the yard. But you'll see them in groups. Again, don't try to touch them. Don't scare them off. Just let them do what they're doing. They will move away because, again, they don't want to have human interaction. Just admire them. And the sandhill cranes, we're having an issue. We have a very large population of sandhill cranes here in Deltona, and they will go from lake to lake to lake, which means they have to cross a lot of our major roads, or even some of our smaller roads that, you know, have higher traffic volumes. And we're having multiple either injuries or kills with that. So we're creating some other different ways. But one of the main problems that we're having is people think it's fun or nice that they're putting bird feeders out and they're feeding them in droves. And then we have some areas that have them on both sides of the major road. So when they feed them, which is also against FWC's regulations of feeding, you know, endangered or threatened species, then you're drawing them out into more of a location where they have more areas to become injured or dead. So their young learn
to follow the
same routes.
In other words, the old axiom, I'm loving them to death.
Correct. Yes. So if you have bird feeders out, don't put them out if you have the sandhill cranes or any of those array. Take them out, put them away for a while. It'll break their habits of stopping in those major places, and they'll learn to feed on their own with what they need to be eating, and not so much with the bird seed that doesn't necessarily have the right nutrients or ingredients, so to speak, of what they need to have.
The sandhill cranes and the white ibis, there's plenty of food here for them.
Oh, yes.
They don't need to be supplemented.
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Good enough then. All right, so, you know, that makes sense. Okay, we need to embrace that idea.
Yes. If you see an injured sandhill crane, you can call FWC, and they have other people that can come around and take a look at it. Or our code enforcement are very good with animals, and they have a lot of rehabbers, so we can contact City of Deltona's Animal Control Center and see if it's an animal that they can help, or if they have contacts for other rehabbers that may be able to come out and get those birds and rehab them instead of allowing them to lay there and die. Okay,
and I would imagine at this time, if our audience is looking, our director is probably showing the phone number for our code enforcement where folks can call if they see an injured sandhill crane. All right.
And we can also post and have on there, you can look up myfwc.com, and it has lists of all the protected species, all the way from alligators to everything, how to get permits, how to do all that stuff, and contact numbers for injured animals, endangered species that may have been run over or whatever, so that you can get yourself educated with that program as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.